All right. Good morning. If everyone can take their seats, I think we're going to get started. Great. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Raydell Peischler. I'm the executive producer of events here at Government Executive Media Group. And I'm very excited that we're all joined here today. It's hard to believe, but this is actually our 7th CX Summit. So today's Customer Experience Summit is all about putting the customer first. So we want to thank you actually to our audience because over the past summits, we've been asking you for feedback through our surveys to really try to understand what's next. What would you like to hear about customer experience? And what we've found is that you're really looking for concrete steps, case studies from agencies on what they're doing and how you can take immediate steps back at your agency based on what they've done. So that is our goal today, is that you have some of these concrete steps to take with you. So we'd love to hear if that's what we've accomplished after today's session. So before we get started, I just want to go over a few housekeeping items. Please have your cell phones out. Please silence them, though. We ask that you get social, so use our hashtag. It's CX Summit. Send your questions that way. Send any great pictures or comments or even aha moments. We like to track that after the event, so thank you so much. And we'll be monitoring it today for questions. And also, I would like to recognize that without the support of our underwriters today, we could not be here. So our elite underwriter today is Qualtrics. Thank you for their support, as well as our strategic underwriter, Highpoint. So thank you so much. All right, so we are going to get started. I am going to introduce our keynote this morning, Anahita Riley. She is the Chief Customer Officer at GSA. And Anahita works with a team to improve the end-to-end experience of GSA customers by aligning operations to customer needs. So please help me and join me welcoming her to the stage.
Thank you, Raydell. Well, good morning, everyone. How are you? Good. Thank you. I'm excited to be here today talking about customer experience, the area that I am clearly so passionate about, and I think it's a great fit given my title. I'm going to see if I know how to use this clicker. So as we see here, GSA Office of Customer Experience. A lot of folks don't know that GSA has an Office of Customer Experience, especially within my agency. I meet people all the time and they say, who are you? What do you do? I'm saying we're the group of 5 people that work at a central office right across the street, so thank you, GovExec, for making this so convenient for us. And we work on customers. When we talk about customers, we put them in 4 categories. We think about our customer employees, or our employees as customers. We think about customer agencies. We think about the industry partners that we work so closely with, and we think about the public. But our mission, as you see up here, is to improve the end-to-end experience of our customers by aligning operations to customer needs. We're very purposeful in designing this mission so that we were focused on customer needs, not necessarily wants. Sometimes customers might not know what they want, but by analyzing data, analyzing trends, we can really get to the heart of what they need. And then going back and aligning it to our operations. So this is where it gets us past that soft, fluffy customer service, smile, nod, be happy, to really where are we saving dollars and cents? Where are we making our employees empowered? Where are we thinking really strategically about the bones of the organization and perhaps where we might have some gaps in our process that we can fix. So customers help inform all of that. And I'm jumping ahead of myself. But when we started our team in 2014, it was 2 people with the hypothesis of if we start a small nucleus of customer-minded folks in the agency with the sole mission of focusing on the customer, can we drive change? And we decided to focus on these 5 areas that private sector has really mastered in the customer experience realm. Understanding, what do your customers think, feel, want to do about your product? Process, what's going on in your agency, what are the processes you have? Culture, how are you talking not just to your customers, but to one another about your customers? Governance, this is investment review boards, how you're putting performance plans together, and then lastly, product development. Where are you piloting, trying new things, and again, getting to anticipating the customer needs as opposed to just their wants. There we go. So then leads to our vision of what do we want to do? We want GSA to design and evolve our products and services, products and processes, relying on a data-driven understanding of customer perspectives. Customer-centric thinking becomes part of a business as usual and is firmly ingrained in our operations. We're seeing this now. So in 2014, when we were just this small group of a couple people running after things, saying, we're the customer team, people were probably annoyed with us. I'm seeing some of my colleagues in the audience who are probably those very folks annoyed with us. But there are very strong partners. And we wanted to say, we think about the customers inside and out. They're at the table. They have a voice. There are advisory boards. They're part of the decision-making process, too. And now in 2018, we've been a formal office for 2 years. So FY16, for those of you wanting strategic or actual tactical steps, 2016 was the first year we had a financial plan. We're working capital fund funded. We had a code with OPM. So we're an actual office with FTE up to 6 people. When then I talk about what we do as an office today, we have 4 buckets of work that we describe to our customers. They can come to us, our customers being inside the agency directly, to work on customer research, and that's that understanding piece of it. They can come to us for strategy help. We designed for our public building service a customer experience strategy, looking at feedback from employees and customers, what metrics are we using, really looking at the entire ecosystem of the organization. We have pilots, so we'll take the data that we get and we will use that data to inform, let's try something. Let's take it offline, spend $5,000 if that, $2,000, or use an intern and try something. And then capacity building. We lead a human-centered design workshop across the agency in partnership with the OPM Innovation Lab to build this human-centered design capacity across the agency. How are you designing around customers? It's not new if you haven't heard of it yet. It's like human-factored engineering. There's bits of Lean Six Sigma in there, process management, whatever you want to call it. It's human-centered design. I think it's using common sense when you're designing is how I like to equate it. And then over here on the right-hand side of the screen, we play from top to bottom, bottom to top. And that's the benefit of being a small group at the central hub of the agency. I report up to our deputy administrator. So we work at the senior leadership level. We help inform strategy across the agency. But then we also work with our frontline employees. We talk to them. We roll up our sleeves. We listen to them. We see what they're hearing and what they're doing. And we help them implement the strategies that we're defining. So going through, most people that know me know that I'm also a yoga instructor. And so you'll start to see some of that peppered in throughout today because I feel like there's a very direct correlation between yoga philosophy and having empathy for your customers. And so as you see here, I have Adopt a Beginner's Mind. Anyone understand beginner's mind? Have you heard beginner's mind before? Let's see a show of hands. Whoa, nice. So beginner's mind is the concept where you're approaching something for the first time. You're remembering what it was like to experience an experience for the first time. In yoga, it's saying when you go to your mat, take all your ego, leave it at the door. Think about what it would be like the first time you're a yoga student. You're embarrassed, you're nervous, you don't know what's going on. Children are a great example of this too. Children approach the world with a beginner's mind because clearly it's the first time they're doing most things. I have small kids, I see this all the time. It's wonderful. You see the awe, you see the confusion, the why does it have to be that way? It's just going right back to that very beginning when you're first experiencing something. And in the customer experience world, this is so important because oftentimes as employees, doing a process or a project, we're so familiar with it. We know where to click, we know what to do, we can do the shortcuts, we can do it in our sleep, we do it day in and day out. We don't understand why it's so hard for our customers. Our customers don't necessarily do the same thing over and over and over again. They come to us maybe once a day if they're a routine customer, but usually it's not very often. Maybe it's once a year. It's whenever they need something. They don't need to be experts in our processes like we do. They're coming at it with this beginner's mind. So we've looked at GSA in ways that we can really enforce this beginner's mind mentality, and part of that is with the Voice of the Customer program. When we started out as an agency, we looked at how can we be collectors of data, and then how can we analyze the data to start showing those trends of what our customers are saying. And using a very defined Voice of the Customer program, now it's defined. When it started, it was really our team helping collect data across the agency together and be that central hub to reduce burden on our customers. Now it's a more refined program. We have a customer experience management system. Folks, Qualtrics are helping us with that. And we're using it to track the customer's journey and pull in the data points that matter while also minimizing the burden on our customers. And this is important. We're highlighting the data. We're showcasing what the data says because we don't want our employees to forget what our customers are experiencing and feeling. We want to continuously get that feedback. We want to really force that beginner's mindset, even when it's easy to forget about it. So adopt a beginner's mind, keep it going, don't forget about it. Let's see. There we go. Tell stories. This is the next piece that we always remember on our team. Telling stories is what builds that empathy for your customers. It gets at that cultural element, but it also drives people to action. We use the data through our Voice of the Customer program, or it can be Voice of the Employee or Voice of the Supplier. And we put together journey maps around the customer experience. It's end-to-end, shows across organizations what's happening. We've used this internally, too. We have, for the HR onboarding experience, when an employee comes in the door, they don't just deal with HR. They deal with HR and with IT and with security and with their home office. So we tell that story of the employee coming in. We tell that story of the employee coming in on day one and not having any equipment to use. We tell the story of the employee coming in and not knowing where to show up or having to fill out the same paperwork 20 times because it got lost in transition. Journey maps help us tell that story. And to do that, we have to make sure that we've got a really strong team of storytellers. What does that look like? Data analysts, diplomats, people that are entrepreneurs and optimists, because you never want to let your team be the ones to say, this is too hard, we give up. We've got a team that they really care, they're really passionate, they build strong relationships across the organization, and again, I'm seeing those relationships that we have. Robert, hello, all the way there back there. And so we see these partnerships are essential to having strong working engagements, people that care about the customers. We're highlighting the things that they see, and we're bringing them to the central leadership too. We're saying this is an area that our customer or our employees are living over and over again. It's painful for our customers. They're seeing it. We're giving them that avenue to talk about it, to explore it, to make it better. So telling stories is something that can be very difficult to fit in as you have time to do it. But we will unabashedly go to our senior leadership and say, some of our employees or some of our customers think that GSA is like the 8th circle of Dante's Inferno. We heard that on a survey. We put it up there for everyone to see. And granted, the common response is, oh, that's one experience, that's feedback, it's bad feedback, or I know that happened and it's because of this, I'm gonna give you every excuse in the book as to why that happened. We say, I don't care. That's that employee's experience. Coming at it with a beginner's mind, we don't want that to be anybody's experience. And if it's one person's experience, that's one detractor. And as we all know, detractors are bad. They're going to go out and talk badly about our program, our organization, and then that amplifies how bad it is. So telling stories, I would be remiss if I also didn't mention my direct team. They are amazing. They're not here today because they're working on getting some of our surveys out right now. But Matt, Camille, Megan, and Christine, and then myself, the 5 of us, we partner with the different parts of the organization, again, partnership. But they all bring different skill sets that allow them to tell stories. Not all of them are data analysts, not all of them are designers, but we are learning for those skills and piecing it together and then refining as we go. So we try something, refine it, say that was a really good skill set, more people should have that. Practice non-attachment, back to yoga. Non-attachment, anyone heard of this concept before? Couple hands, probably the same hands as beginner's mind. Non-attachment is more Buddhist, but it's thinking that when you are attached to an outcome or to what you think should be the case, that is when suffering follows. So with non-attachment in CX, we say if you detach from what you think should be the answer or what you think your customers should be doing, you open yourself up to actually listen to the feedback, to hear what your customers are saying, and then to do something about it. Economists might say this is similar to sunk costs. You're saying, okay, that's a sunk cost. We're going to move on. We're going to forget about it. But with non-attachment, we say, I know that we think it should be this way, or we designed a process or a program. We spent all this money to do it this way. When you detach from it, you then listen to what the customers are saying, and maybe they didn't want that after all. Maybe it's the last priority for them. By practicing this, we can go back to our leadership and say, we actually should probably spend a little less time on that one initiative and more time fixing the user experience before it goes out. We pull this in with human-centered design, too. When we're testing it, when we're cycling, we're developing with our humans, with our customers at the table, our users at the table. we're all co-designing and co-creating, we allow that opportunity to really listen to what they're saying and not superimpose our own preconceptions on top of it. This is also where you allow yourself to fail fast. So I talked earlier about pilots. We like to try things. We tried at GSA a couple years ago. Yelp, I think it's still all the rage. I don't know, I don't use it myself because I'm a slow technology adopter, which is funny for someone in my position. But Yelp, we thought maybe we can use Yelp to see how our customers feel about our buildings, our public spaces. Perhaps we can mine Yelp data and know right away if there's a leak in a cafeteria or a water fountain's not working. So we put 27 of our buildings on Yelp for 3 months. And we tested it. We worked with our property managers. We worked with Yelp. We explored what works, what doesn't work. Are we getting useful feedback? We ran this pilot for 3 months. We talked about it across the leadership. We talked about it in the programs. We learned that we only had over 3 months and 27 buildings, one useful comment that came back. Yes, one useful comment that told us something that we didn't already know through other channels. Everything else was specific to some of our customer agencies in the buildings, so we went and connected them in and said, perhaps you should explore this. They're associating Yelp with your company or your agency. But for us, it wasn't a success. It wasn't something that warranted the time spent to get all of our buildings on Yelp, the investment that it would have cost. So doing that 27 building, 3-month pilot cost us just an intern's time, versus if we had just said, we're going to do this and jump right in, it was going to be pretty expensive, a couple $100,000 to pay for that account. Testing it, we learned doesn't work or doesn't provide us enough for the investment. And then we went back to leadership and we talked about it. We said, this was a pilot. They said, hey, what's going on? I thought we were going on Yelp. Sounds really cool. Let's do it. And I was like, actually, it didn't really give us anything that we needed. So the pilot was a success because we learned. And now we're learning from it, and we're not investing in an area that we don't necessarily need to. That's not to say that others shouldn't invest in it. I think it's still a great idea. But for us, again, it didn't warrant the savings. And we were only able to do that because we weren't attached to moving forward with Yelp. And the last point here is close the loop. I think most folks know this, and a good Voice of the Customer program has this embedded in it. This is where you close the loop. You go back to your customers. You say, I heard you. I listened. And this is what I'm doing as a result. Because when you don't, your customers come back to you and they say, stop asking me. I'm tired of telling you and you not fixing it. Leave me alone. Opt out. And they no longer want to talk to you. They no longer want to hear anything from you. I equate this often to weddings, babies. Anytime you have a present or a gift come in, most of you probably send a thank you note, because otherwise it's rude if you're not. And apologies if you don't think, my husband doesn't think it's necessary. He thinks a text is fine. I'm old school. I like to write it out and say thank you so much. A good thank you note, you're saying, thank you so much for, and because I have babies, I'll say thank you so much for the burp cloths. My son just spit up all over them yesterday, and they are so useful. I really appreciate it. I don't know what I would have done without this. So you're saying what you did with that gift that they gave you. And I equate this here with customer experience because feedback is a gift. Your customers don't have to tell you what's good or what's bad. They don't have to tell you what works or what doesn't. It's time for them to do so and to provide meaningful feedback. So when you actually take the effort to close the loop, and now there are a lot of tools and systems out there to help you do so more efficiently, but when you close that loop, you can convert your customers to become, from detractors to become promoters, because they say, you actually read my comments. I appreciate that. In my central office of 5 people, we read all of the comments that come in from our customers. We have tools that help us do that, but we still go back and we read through everything. So if we have 50,000 comments, we'll read them. And we find ideas for our pilots in those. We find ideas for building relationships or networking or trying new things, building streamlined operations. Those are gold. And then we want to go back and tell the customers, because of what you told us, we are now automating GSA Advantage or improving what GSA Advantage looks like. We are improving the functionality of our systems. The things that you use, that you depend on, and you've told us are painful, we're listening and we're investing. So to kind of summarize what we talked about, adopting a beginner's mindset, telling stories, practicing non-attachment, and then closing the feedback loop, we found over the last 3.5, 4 years to be essential to helping drive this cultural change across the agency. And when I say cultural change, I don't mean employees come in and they're angry and they want to provide a bad customer experience, because that's never the case. Employees are always passionate. They care. They want to do the right thing. If they're angry, it's because processes exist that prohibit them from doing the right thing for their customers. It's because they're hearing from their customer that something's broken, and they feel like they can't do anything about it. So we found that these tricks, these tips, help us open up, empower our employees, and create a more cohesive organization on behalf of our customers. And lastly, I'll just close with what is different now. And I'll say proposed legislation, so my own beast don't kill, my friends don't kill me. Proposed legislation, we have the Federal Agency Customer Experience Act circulating. We have the Government Customer Service Accountability and Improvement Act circulating. Both of these would make wondrous strides towards improving customer experience across the agency or government. We have executive support. There's centers of excellence. There's IT modernization. There is the President's Management Agenda, and then a customer experience cross-agency priority goal. These are all wonderfully structured together across with other pieces of CAP goals, President's Management Agenda. There's a strong focus from the top down in today's government everywhere that's really saying we care about our customers, it's important. Lastly, CX trends, digital services, website interactions, how to do things more streamlined with the digital component. I think you'll hear from some CIOs a little bit later this morning. Artificial intelligence and virtual reality. We're using that. Most folks have heard about using artificial intelligence with contact centers. It's a great opportunity to do so and to save some costs. Virtual reality, we do this in our Philadelphia area. We're piloting virtual reality in buildings so that with customers, they can put on these VR goggles and see what the space might look like with all of their designs embedded in the space, saving them lots of costs when they realize, actually, I don't want the bathroom there, I want it over there. It can save lots and lots of money. And then robotics process automation, very cool pilots happening, I think, across the government on this front. And human-centered design is another area that's picking up speed. It's a very useful tool, a way to build that capacity across your agency. So it's exciting to see a full house. Folks focused on the customer today. I know we've got a lot of different events happening, a lot of opportunities to continue to connect. My email is at the beginning. I don't know that that slide is on there, but that's Trevor's face. So I'll wrap up. I don't think that there's time. There might be time for one question, but I'll look to you. There's time for a question or two if there are any. Great. Thank you all for your time, and I look forward to seeing you and working. Oh, yeah.
Sorry. What was the one useful Yelp comment?
There was a comment, yeah, the one useful Yelp comment. There was a comment that there was, again, a leak in the cafeteria that we were able to find out about more timely than had we have waited for it to come through the normal reporting channels. So, yeah, otherwise, they were all about the occupants. Yes?
I missed your email address.
Oh, my email address. It is my first name dot last name, and so I think those are on the program, at gsa.gov. Yeah. Yes, Kim?
You stated that you started the work or beginning CX work at GSA in 2014.
14.
So 2 years maybe it took you to get fully functional with the operating budget. Is that a norm? Is that, was it longer than you know?
It's hard to say, yeah, it's hard to say if it was a norm because we were the first agency-wide customer experience office, not the first customer experience officer in government. I think that might have been the Federal Student Aid. And then VA followed shortly after with their Veterans Experience Office. So we started, it was probably about a year and a half. It was at the end of 2014 that we started piloting. And we learned very quickly. We started with centralizing our surveys. So we did a data call around what surveys are going out to our customers. And then we targeted the ones that were the largest, the most burdensome for our customers to centralize and reduce the burden, reduce the cost that we were spending as an agency. From there, we took the savings from centralizing those surveys and invested them into our team to start up and create a formal budget. So that's how we got our start. And we continue to look for opportunities to say, if I can streamline contact center operations across the agency, we'd like as an agency to reinvest X% of that into customer operations. So it's connecting the dollars and the cents with the employee experience. It's no longer an if or an or. They become an and from a mission versus operations versus customer perspective. Yeah, and I think this is the last question.
Okay, just to follow up, within that 2 years, when did you really start to see maybe the organizational like changes, the transformation maybe within the organization around what you all were doing?
Within that, we started to, right away, from our partners that we would work with, when we would work with folks on the ground, frontline leadership, buy-in right away because you're showing interest in what these employees already care about and do. From the leadership perspective, it was within a couple months where we started showing the dollar savings that there was true buy-in as to this is a great thing to do. We want to invest in this. We want to move forward. So, but from the employee level, there is a bit of a learning curve of don't throw more work at me. Don't just throw this over the fence. I've got enough to do. Leave me alone. And once you get past it and show, we're here with you. We're working with you. We're rolling up our sleeves. This isn't an if more work. It will save you time, and it will actually make you happier in your job. But it's having the right conversations. It's a different conversation for everybody. So knowing that diplomatic skill set, knowing what conversation is going to appeal to whom when. So thank you so much. It was wonderful speaking with you all today.
Thank you so much. So many great takeaways there. I think really practicing non-attachment as well as closing the loop is a good one, a good reminder. So next up, it's my pleasure to welcome Head of Federal, Trevor DeLaw, for his session. Thanks.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is actually Trevor DeLaw, but that still works. It's nice to meet with you. I'm really looking forward to spending the next 15 minutes talking with you about CX. I've been with Qualtrics. I've been with Qualtrics about 10 years, and 5 years. We've got a team of 10 in DC who are exclusively focused on the federal government. In my 5 years here, we've been talking about CX a long time, so it's fun to actually see it become something that a lot of other people are talking about. We've got a team of 10. We're out in Tyson's Corner, and looking forward to the session this morning. You know, something that we've seen in the commercial marketplace is that the customer experience has become the new battlefield. A couple different studies done. 80% of Americans or consumers have switched brands purely due to a negative experience with the company that put that product out. That would imply that 80% of the people in this room have switched products, switched service providers, switched brands based on a negative experience that they've encountered. Additionally, Gallup did a study that shows 2/3 of the employees are kind of somewhat disengaged. And the employee experience and the customer experience are kind of inextricably linked. If employees are disengaged and not happy, then chances are it's going to rub off on how they treat customers. And additionally, you know, there's an awful lot of money that's spent on outsourced market research, which tends to be slow. And a lot of these outsourced market research providers tend to hold that data hostage and don't make it widely available to those who might benefit from it. How does that affect the government? In a Pew study in 2017, there's a bit of a trust issue. I think we're all familiar with that. We read plenty of articles on it. From the employee side, only 47% of federal employees took the FEBS survey last year, and that has been directionally going down, which in itself implies that there's a bit of an engagement problem. And the same thing applies for market research. A lot of money is spent. So what ends up happening, and the conditions are different, obviously, from commercial to the government, because citizens can't choose where to file their tax. They can't choose where to get the Social Security benefits from. But because of what they've learned in the commercial marketplace, they bring the experiences or the expectations they have with how companies treat them to the government. And those expectations are set extremely high based on the fact that the commercial market's been doing it for a long time. Some negative consequences that result if the experience isn't measured and improved is an increased oversight. And people don't like oversight. It's wasteful time. They spend a lot of time gathering data. There are general trust issues. Budget constraints happen. So it's really imperative that the government gets better at providing experiences to both employees and customers, because they don't want to waste any more time on doing non-value-added activities. At Qualtrics, our mission is to close the experience gap, to understand what those experience gaps are, and to put that data in the hands of our customers to spot them early, to democratize access to those insights such that they can go off and close them. Based on our ability to do that, we've experienced 40% year-over-year growth since 2002. We are in 75% of the Fortune 100 companies. We don't do the same thing in every one of our customers. We support measurement of a lot of different kinds of experiences. In some situations, it's customer experience. In other situations, it's employee experience. We have close to, I think, 9,000 customers globally who are doing some sort of experience management in 90 countries. And the thing that I'm personally and my team is most proud of is that we've got 50 federal agencies who are measuring and improving their customer experiences with our technology. Not everyone doing the same thing as I said, but it's been a long road, and we're happy to be here talking about it. How do we do that? We enable our customers to collect data at the exact moment in time when the data is most valuable. We do it by providing real-time access to data that's both collected, analyzed, and most importantly, as Anahita said, take action on to improve that customer experience. In our space, there's kind of a wide range of tools. And on one end, you have kind of simple-to-use tools, which tend to lack sophistication. On the other end, you've got extremely sophisticated tools that are extremely hard to use. We kind of hit it right in the middle. We put the user at the center of our technology. So we are very, very sophisticated in what we can do, but make it extremely simple for users to go out and understand and measure experiences. We are an extremely scalable platform. That's just not in the volume of information we can collect, but it's in how customers can start. It doesn't require that someone spend a year planning and developing all the requirements before they get started collecting that information. And we make it really easy to kind of expand that footprint over time. We are extremely flexible. We are methodology agnostic. We believe that our customers know their customers best and know what methodology best fits those customers. So we don't suppose to know how to do that better than you. Therefore, we are methodology agnostic. We allow our customers to define their methodology that best fits their needs. And if customers don't really know what their methodology is up front, we do have there is methodology in the product to get started with. Everyone across the organization should have access to the data that's been collected in real time, because everyone in every organization has got a role in understanding, measuring, and improving the experiences. So we make that data democratized to the right people and, most importantly, the right business processes to drive change, to improve experiences. We've got a part of our overall stack that helps our customers understand what might happen based on what's happened in the past. We can allow you to run predictive modeling. Clearly in the federal space, security, pretty important, right? We're a FedRAMP in process and expect to get our first ATO in a matter of days. And based on the fact that the government needs to support every single citizen out there, we also have CAG 2.0, and all of our current customers are 508 in terms of how they're using the product. To put it into pictures, that person in blue in the middle is your customer, the citizen. And you need the ability to interact with that person on whatever touch point or channel they choose to interact with you. In some cases, it's call centers. In other cases, it's websites. In other cases, it's offices. And you need to do that at scale, and you need to make sure that that interaction you have with them when you're asking them for help, because it's a gift, feels like a conversation. It can't be some 52-question long multiple-choice survey, because people don't like those. It needs to be contextual based on who they are. They need to feel like you're speaking with them, so that when they speak back to you, you're getting really good actual information. Also, you need to make sure that that feedback, that conversation takes place at the exact moment that matters. If you ask that question too late, likely they're not going to answer it, or they're just going to kind of only provide you an answer if they had a really, really bad experience. But good experiences are really, really important too, because they help you kind of figure out how to keep doing things better. So you need to have those conversations with these citizens and internal stakeholders and employees at the exact moment that matters. That's absolutely key. Oops. One thing that we found in both commercial and especially in government is that the government likes to track a lot of operational data. How many calls did the call center get? How many of those calls were closed in the first time? How many website visitors? How many cases have been opened? How many employees are trained? What's the attrition rate? Very, very kind of rich in O data. And O data tells you what's happening. It's operational data. It tells you exactly what's happening according to your metrics. What we found is that there's kind of a deficit when it comes to experience data. Experience data is why it's happening. So O data is what's happening, X data is why it's happening. And when you put those two pieces of data together, you really, really get a good view of how to change your operational metrics on changing the experiences that you're providing to your customers. Examples of X data are, the levels of employee engagement, feedback from customers, perception of the brand, user experience. Our platform makes it easy to bring those two kinds of data together to really give you a holistic 360-degree picture of what's happening and why it's happening across all different demographics and segments of customers, and internal and external. Because of the volume of information that these programs collect, it's not really feasible to think that humans can interpret all of it in the amount of time it takes to be responsive to get back, because, again, it's a gift. You want to be responsive right away. So we have a machine learning-based solution, the data science, that really kind of helps predict what could happen based on what's happened in the past. There's a couple of different. One is Text IQ. Text IQ helps you understand in really, really efficient ways what people are saying and what they're meaning, not at the word level, but provides you sentiment. Sentences that have the word good could be bad comments. Sentences that have the word bad could be good comments. So we understand how words relate to each other at sentence level and predict sentiment based on what that's saying. And we look and comb through all of the data that your customers provide you and employees and basically pre-select topics that we see. Here are common trends of what your open text data is telling you. Additionally, we make it really easy to run statistical regression on your data, both operational and experience, to say that, hey, look, the last time your satisfaction level dropped to this level, here's what happened on your operational side. Call center went up. We allow you to spot trends across channels. So how can you reduce the number of calls going to the call center by providing better content on the website? And I got to go a little quicker, I think. All right. This is just a simple little picture of our platform. We started early on with just a research core, which kind of made it really easy for people to collect information from people in a way that felt like a conversation. Number two, we make it easy to kind of analyze that information at scale and begin to make decisions about what you want to change to improve those experiences. And finally, and most importantly, we make it simple to take action and improve those experiences, which increases credibility and trust and everything else. We are an open platform that supports many of the current other systems you use, such as Salesforce and Workday, et cetera. And we believe that there are 4 key experiences that organizations need to really, really excel at to be best in class. Customer experience, employee experience, product experience. It's much cheaper to serve the citizen by providing digital services, digital products to those citizens, as opposed to having them call in. So product experience is a key. And then brand experience in the government is a little bit different. The IRS, irrespective of how easy they make it to take your money, they're probably always going to have a bad brand. And Social Security, conversely, irrespective of how hard it is to get your money, they're always going to have a good brand. So a couple simple bullets about our point of view if you're just getting started in your CX journey. It kind of feels like maybe a bit of an over-reliance on measuring satisfaction and kind of an under-reliance on measuring success. If people are successful without a lot of effort and in a little time at getting what they want, chances are they're going to be satisfied. So understanding what's preventing them from being successful has a direct correlation to how satisfied they're going to be. So really make sure that satisfaction is not the only measurement, but really success is a part of that measurement. Number 2, default to open, no black box. As you begin to build up your platform and your solution, your stack for however you do customer experience, make sure that you've got the ability to kind of put whatever algorithms and methodology and whatever else you want into it. Don't rely on having to always talk to a third party to change that, because as you learn how to improve experiences, these measurements are going to change. And if every change you make kind of breaks something else, that's not really a scalable approach going forward. We believe that you own, or so you know your customers better than anyone else. And to really kind of maintain a high level of control over your CX solutions and not to kind of outsource or give that to a third party. And also, we've developed our platform to allow our customers to deploy with agility. You don't have to boil the ocean. You don't have to do everything at once up front. Get started with your most important touch point. Take some learnings. Figure out kind of what the next touch point is you want to go off and improve. So start small, iterate often, scale fast, and kind of think DevOps in terms of the approach. Oops. I wanted to talk through one of our customers' success stories. And again, it's not really related to satisfaction. It's more related to success, because that's what they were tracking. Healthcare.gov. A couple key things that they did a little bit differently than a lot of others out there. Number one, they implemented a minimum viable product in a matter of weeks. They didn't plan a long time. They didn't overthink it. They didn't try to kind of figure out every possible scenario. They put together a minimum viable product and got it out there in a matter of weeks. They developed their own measurement based on what they knew they needed to understand to improve their user situation. And they called that the pain index. The pain index is a correlation between operational data, what all their backend analytics platforms were saying, and their experience data, what their customers were saying. And they basically chased that pain index around. And the pain index was directly correlated to the content on healthcare.gov that supported the enrollment process. They provided real-time access to that data and to the analytics to the content team, who was constantly making changes to the content. The minute they fixed one problem, they found another one, because it's impossible to know everything until you get started. Another critical thing they did is they really defined not only a success measurement based on what was successful to them or what was successful to their customer. They wanted to find a measurement and build that measurement that measured success of both them and their customer. So the left is a pretty impressive thing that they've achieved. They reduced the amount of time it took to enroll for millions and millions and millions of people to get health insurance. And they've reduced the overall time on site. So the left metric is a win for their customers. They were more successful in less time in achieving their outcomes for roughly 8 million people. The right metric is theirs. It reduced the overall time on site that people spent trying to get insurance, which had big cost savings for them. Don't take our word for it. A little cheeky, late last night. A couple of our federal customers, we have commercial brands like JetBlue, American Express, BMW, leaders in the experience economy, as well as, this is what I care most about, our federal customers. I'm the federal person. And I heard this saying a while back. I don't know who said it, but based on how critical improving the customer experience is to trust in government, trust is earned in drips and lost in buckets. And at the end of the day, success builds trust. So with that, I guess I'm done. And I'm not sure, it's time for questions or? No? I went too long. Sorry.
A big thank you to Qualtrics today for your support and great session, Trevor. Next up, we have a panel discussion. It's dedicated to best practices in understanding your customers, from feedback and surveys to customer journey maps and profiles. So please join me in welcoming to the stage. We have Victor Zapanti. He's the UX designer at 18F. We have Samir Battar. He's the director of Office of Visitor Services at Smithsonian Institution. We have Lee Becker. He's the Chief of Staff with Veterans Experience Officer at the Department of Veterans Affairs. And then moderating this great conversation is Gov Executives Editor-in-Chief Tom Shoup. So take it away, Tom.
Thanks, Rita.
Yeah.
Thanks for promising a great conversation. You've set the bar very high.
Very high, Tom.
We'll do the best we can. And thanks to all of you. I think we may have some people in the audience who are relatively new to CX and the techniques involved. These people are not. They're deeply experienced in this area, so I'm looking forward to getting their insights. So the subject of the panel is understanding your customer, which is the first step, I would guess, in the process. So let's talk about what's the first step in the first step. Where do you begin in the process of understanding your customers?
Funding. Just kidding.
So again, I'm Victor. I'm with 18F. I am a user experience designer. I'm often a design and research lead on my projects. So the first thing we'll often do is we'll have stakeholder conversations with a partner agency to get a sense of who they believe their customer is, who they believe their users are. From there, we'll start to do recruitment in which we'll enlist members of the public to have a series of conversations to learn about their needs. So to me, I believe that the first and most important step, and I think that this is one that's often not done enough in government in particular, is actually speaking to the public, actually speaking to your users.
Great. Lee?
Yes, great question. I mean, I'm Lee Becker with the Department of Veterans Affairs, Veterans Experience Office. We're the Customer Experience Office for the department. And we started this journey after the crisis out of Phoenix. If you recall, there was wait lists, unfortunately, that were not aware. And we had veterans that were, we were reporting that veterans were getting appointments, and unfortunately, that wasn't the case. So the operational metrics, was not telling us the information we needed. And the point that we're missing was really the voice of the customer, voice of our veterans telling us, because the veterans were telling us, we have good intentions, but it's really about the mechanisms. You have to have the right mechanisms. And what you're kind of getting at, Tom, is what are the right mechanisms to make sure that you're listening to the voice of the customer. So for us, when we started on our journey, it was really a matter of just starting that conversation with veterans and to really ask them to understand from the veteran's perspective, what does that journey look like? We know very well at VA, what our, how we are structured, and as all our agencies, how we're structured in silos and stovepipes. As we know, a lot of that is because of the way the funding from Congress comes in, and so therefore that's how you're managing it through that. But what's exciting about what we've done at VA is really kind of turn things upside down and say, okay, from the veteran perspective, what are the services and benefits and care that they expect, and how we then should be organizing around their needs and wants. And so doing a macro journey map of really just the first step is, what does that journey map look like at a macro level? From a veteran perspective, starting when they actually get into the military, because that's when really the journey starts, to when they leave service, sitting down roots, and through memorial, when a veteran passes away, and even after that, as you know, the VA is charged to take care of their survivors and benefits post-death. So that journey, what does that look like, and how do we provide that services? So firstly, it has to start with that understanding from the veteran's perspective, and then that's a front stage, and then understand how do we need to reorganize ourselves to that veteran.
Samir?
Hi, I'm Samir from the Smithsonian. We actually are not a federal agency, so we have a lot more latitude than I think all of you have in your jobs in the federal agency. So we're a nonprofit, technically, a 501c3, chartered by Congress. And while we do follow, typical sort of advice from, is it OPM? OPM?
If you were in government, you would know.
We have a little flexibility. So we, but not only Smithsonian museums, museums around our country, we sort of live and breathe, sort of die by research. Now, we're getting better and more thorough at it. We put almost every instrument you can imagine, survey instrument you can imagine, into the field. So our most popular, which is also the most economic, are intercept surveys, right? So on the floor of our museums, many of you, how many of you have visited a Smithsonian museum? Fabulous, good Washingtonians. How many have ever been surveyed at Smithsonian? Look at that. So there you go, 5 people. So we just concluded and published last year, I'll share it with you if you're interested, our largest survey of the visitor experience ever conducted in our 173-year-old history. So we stood in front of every museum, all 19 of them. Well, the African American History and Culture wasn't opened yet, so not that museum. But every other museum, so 18, over the course of a year, every season, right? Because we know And we had to prove, and now we know empirically, that visitation at museums is highly seasonal. You can't study a lot of nodding heads. Good. So, convincing leadership about this and now showing them empirically this is the case. You can't study a survey or a summer population and say, annualized, this is Smithsonian behavior, demographics, et cetera. So an intercept survey is critical. We also run very regular web studies of our website. That's one of the most frequented tools in planning a visit. We run card sorts, and we look for title testing on the floors of the museum. We run a lot of front-end data gathering tools, instruments to then begin informing things like value proposition workshops or journey mapping. So, research, all types, namely in person, but some online. There's a huge bias in online, you can ensure objectivity on site when you intercept people, humans, you choose every, whatever third, whatever it is, no matter what gender, no matter what age, no matter what. Online, you're really getting the kind of personality profile who chooses to spend 5 minutes, 10 minutes on a survey, right? Not 10 minutes, 2 minutes, 1 minute on a survey. So we prefer on-site intercepts talking, to my colleague's earlier point, to visitors, real humans. We can rely on some online data.
I want to pick up on that issue of actually talking to people. Is that the first step in the process, and how do you go about doing that?
Yeah, for us, it is. It really is. And it's really has been revolutionary for us as a department, because if you think about, and really most agencies, I would suggest that you do just an analysis of all the different metrics that you measure as an agency. Just kind of put it into a balanced scorecard and see where those metrics, where they fall. When we did this at VA, we've seen that most of the metrics, and it shouldn't be a surprise to you, fell underneath for us and this is over 300 metrics, fell mostly 95% under process and under fiscal, right? So the money and the process piece, which makes sense because you think about Congress and OMB, those are the drivers. But in the employee piece and the customer piece, unfortunately, which is ironic, our whole being is to take care of veterans. That's what we do. But we're not really measuring it. And if we do measure, it's lagging on it. So it was a concerted effort for us to be able to, to do that, to be able to measure our customer and employee interactions is first to talk to them. First understanding, first up from them, what are their wants and needs, and being able to then derive the ability for us to pull that information. So for us, we see this as really two parts. We see it as, we call that CX, when you say CX data, customer experience data, we see it as two parts. So one is the qualitative, and the second is the quantitative. I'm a veteran, and I come from the school of when you're out there, overseas, one of the things you're looking for is signal intelligence. And everyone, you may have heard of signal intelligence. So that's the quantitative piece, being able to get that signal intelligence and be able to see how we do. So we do that through 4 parts right now. One is an enterprise survey where we adopted the Forrester model of measuring effectiveness, how effective was that service, how easy it was. And those are really the two, mostly customer service. If you focus on customer service, you're looking at effective and easy. The third piece, which makes it really exciting for us, is the emotion. Being able to start measuring what's the perceived from a veteran perspective, how did we treat them as a valued customer, right? And the fourth is the trust, is being able to then see, do they trust VA? Because our hypothesis is that if a veteran trusts VA, they will choose VA, okay? So that's the one piece. The second piece is we're doing service line measurement, where we're measuring at the point of service, what their experience is, and again, using the same 3 E's concept. And the third would be is then we're then giving a veteran an opportunity to provide us feedback through a digital comment card. Fourth is social media. We're actually scraping social media to be able to tell us what that conversation is. That is the quantitative piece. But then the qualitative piece is that for us to then be able to validate. That's the human intelligence piece. We need to then validate that what we're seeing from the quantitative is right, and then be able to create when we talk about value propositions, being able to then create what are those tools, the technologies that's needed to be able to address those pieces. And all that information for us as a department feeds into the strategic aspects. So if you look at the VA strategic plan, you'll actually see the VA journey map in that plan. Incredible. Programmatics, operations, and tactics. So that information, because it's one thing you have data, but then what do you do with it? And making sure that we're actually able to do something with it. But so that's, I would say, how we look at data and how we interact with our customer to be able to pull really what matters.
Victor, tell us more about how you speak to customers at the beginning of the process and how that factors into UX design.
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
Sure. Is there a, I'll put it this way, is there a specific process you go through at the beginning when you're speaking to customers in the UX design process?
So at the beginning of a project, like I said, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to recruit users, often based upon the feedback that we get from our stakeholders. Then, again, we're recruiting users, trying to identify a set of users who we believe represent a typical user of a product. In this case, for instance, it's easier for me to talk about a specific product because I've worked on so many. For FOIA.gov, for instance, we spoke to requesters of various profiles. For instance, we spoke to journalists. We spoke to open government types. We spoke to attorneys. And our goal was to understand what are the needs of these various groups so that we can put together what we call personas based upon, like, these are the needs of a typical journalist, these are the needs of a typical attorney, these are the needs of a typical open government activist. So yeah, that's how we go about initially.
I will say, as a manager of journalists, if you spoke to journalists and got their feedback on FOIA, you are a brave person.
I will say I joined the FOIA project because I was a former journalist myself, and a lot of my social sphere are journalists. It was interesting speaking with journalists about FOIA in particular, because for many of them, it's such a negative experience. And that's what we wanted to hear. And in fact, I made sure that the Department of Justice were present, that they were our client at the time. The Department of Justice was often present during these tough conversations. Yeah, I appreciated the straightforwardness with which journalists were willing to share their frustrations.
God bless you. Samir, we talked a little bit, and you mentioned journey maps. Tell me about the process you went, was it 2 years ago that you did the Smithsonian Journey Map?
Yeah. Okay, so yes, I'll answer that. Before we do, I just wanted to go back a question or two. You asked the panel if talking to our visitors or to customers is the first step, and it's not always. Talking to visitors is not always where we begin. Sometimes we'll look behind the scenes at behavior. So footfall patterns in exhibitions. We'll do what's called observational or tracking research. So we watch behaviors, physical behaviors in the market, meaning in the gallery spaces. And we'll see which stops in an exhibition, which museums, like the big three at Smithsonian, I imagine. The Freer-Sackler, about 230,000 visitors a year, whereas Air and Space, 6 to 7 million a year, the second busiest in the world after the Louvre. And so you may know about the South Mall Master Plan. South Mall Master Plan reimagines the South Mall of the Smithsonian campus between the Freer Gallery and the Hirshhorn. And that's where we brought in journey mapping. So the first step there wasn't talking to visitors. Do we need to redesign the South Mall? Right? That's a big question for your average visitor. But we know that the Freer and Sackler galleries and the African Art Museum, sort of subterranean those two, Sackler and African Art, are the least exposed collections at Smithsonian. And that's a problem for Smithsonian, for Americans. We need to expose those collections to the world more. Well, we looked at the entry points into the Sackler and the Freer, the African Art galleries. They're in the Haupt Garden, sort of tucked away, literally behind a gate. There's a gate around the castle, right? There's actually a wall around the Hirshhorn. Let's start there. Putting walls around, I mean, literally around our buildings. I see a lot of nodding heads. So we don't need to start, in those cases, asking visitors. We know later steps and we go ask. So to Victor's point, then we go look for personas. It's not enough to have a lot of graduate degree educated, smart folks from the museum sitting on a table saying, I think, we think, I think. Because that's what we've done for a century in museum planning, right? Architects, designers, scientists, curators are the ones who've designed your public spaces. Wrong answer. So now what we do is we actually go find real users and put them in a room, or we construct personas, right? And so for the journey mapping exercise, we pull together a cross-functional team, you need buy-in, cross-functional team across the Smithsonian, GS5s, GS15s, senior executives around a 2-day workshop. It's expensive getting their time, but it's absolutely a must, and you have to sell that to them. And then you construct personas. What are some of our behavioral types, our psychographics, to use marketing language, our demographics, and so you need to have, a 7-year-old, field tripper. You need to have a New Yorker coming down for Sackler after hour or Freer after hours. You need to have 2 German empty nesters coming in August. You see what I'm saying? You've got to construct as many unique, very specific, and that's the trick with personas, hyper-specific about behaviors, how they come in and how they use your product, your services, et cetera. What are their touch points along the way? And so, to Lee's point earlier, so a journey map, reading sort of left to right, is when they first come in contact with your brand, if you will. And so I guess the veterans, of course, as a veteran myself, I first heard about veteran benefits, being enlisted into the U.S. Army. Later, you will receive GI Bill under the veteran program. Okay, so yeah, so same with Smithsonian. We have to figure out, where do folks first hear about the Smithsonian brand? At an airport, in a tour book, at home from a friend? We have to begin there, and we call that the pre-visit. There's a journey, you can imagine the touch points along the way of planning, not planning, talking, which websites, TripAdvisor, si.edu, whatever those are. There's the arrival onto the campus, which could be National Mall, which could be a broad campus, like the Hirshhorn has a plaza, a garden in the building itself, right? It's not uncommon for a museum to have that kind of acreage. And then there's, of course, the in-building 4-square traditional visitor services, visitor experience perspective. There's post, right? If our job is to sort of, create a more informed citizenry, what is our post-visit impact? What is our relevance after they leave our museums? And so for us, journey mapping now online, I think we shared with you a link in your agenda or some handout that you have. Feel free to go on. It's interactive. You'll see both the personas, drop-down personas, touch points along the way. Where do they touch, right? And what are the subcategories of touch points? A touch point could be digital, or, and under that would be an app, a website, the Smithsonian property website, a TripAdvisor type of planning website, right? Staff contact, security staff, volunteer staff, you get it? So you can see the detailed breakdown there. And then pain points, right? So you have to identify where you highlight points, what's working well for you, because you don't want to touch those really, right? You have to identify what's working well for you, and then what's working not so well for the visitor, really. And those are what we call pain points, right? And so lots of those so you discover. And that helps you then begin to prioritize and allocate your dollars, your time. That's a rough of what a journey mapping takes us about 2 days to get there. I couldn't imagine it happening much quicker, but yeah.
Lee, I wanted to ask you, your office has to work with the Veterans Health Administration, Veterans Benefits Administration, National Cemetery Administration. I would imagine those are very different customer needs that get identified in that process. How do you balance that?
Absolutely, great question. I mean, it's interesting. So we're right now in the process of, really storybooking or creating a playbook of what, because our journey, we've been on this journey for about 3 years. And it's interesting, and so one of the things that we found is that a common theme is tensions. And I don't know, is that when we heard about this word, when we saw this word on paper, it was kind of provocative, and we're like, tensions. The VEO, Veterans Experience Office, is involved in these tensions. But it's interesting, because if you think about it, when we think about and another way to say it in MBA speak is competing commitments, right? So everyone has competing commitments. And so you think about, so for us, for the healthcare side, is the very, very clear direction on providing healthcare, right, to our veterans and our families. Benefits, very clear direction on how to do it. In cemetery, the same thing. And within those administrations, there are various business lines. that have very, very clear direction, right, on how to do this. So then, and as we're flipping the pyramid upside down, where it's from the veteran perspective, those conversations become interesting, right? Because then you have the healthcare person, the doctor, right, and you have the claims examiner, as an example. And, you come in, and what are those competing commitments? The beauty of it is for us, we definitely need to acknowledge that. We have to acknowledge that there are some very concrete missions that they have to do. But from us is what's exciting is when we talk about the veteran, it creates a conversation about integration, and it creates a conversation about how do we balance all the needs of the veteran and to make sure that it is administered in the right time, right place, right to the right veteran. And that's something that's how it almost creates a baseline for us, and it creates a way where we're all in it from the VA perspective, right? It's all for our veterans. So it allows us to come together on that. And the second piece I would say, Tom, is what's interesting for us is we don't see VA, I think the way how it used to be was perhaps maybe more insular. And I see some smiles. We're changing that. We're changing that mindset. It's, we have the veteran service organizations. We have, of course, Congress. We have Department of Labor, think of all the different elements. So for us, it's all the different stakeholders that impact and support our veterans, are key voices to help us to get those solutions. So that's definitely another part of it. So we almost, and this is I think the reason and the brilliance and why we advocate. It's important to have your customer experience office at the enterprise level, because that allows you to transcend across those business lines and allow us to do it. But the key then, this is where the key is we have to understand the importance and, frankly, what each administration is doing, what each stakeholder is doing, and be aware of what those tensions are and be able to balance it to really meet to the ultimate goal is about meeting the needs of our veterans.
Great. I wanted to ask you all about something Anahita said in our keynote this morning about not just looking at customer wants, but customer needs. And do you run into that as an issue, and how do you address it?
Yes.
Who do you want to take it?
What's that?
Want to take that?
Sure. So the dirty little secret is museum visitors don't always know what they need. There are tensions between what they want and what they need. So I mentioned this earlier, when you go out to study, if you are conducting research, there is a known bias in sampling in interviewing and asking humans what they want, what they need, is they tell you what they think they should do, what their behavior should be, right? Or what they think you want to hear, right? And so oftentimes if you just look at data, they tell you that they want to learn when they come to a museum. They want to informally learn. But if you look at actual behavior, sort of behind the scenes tracking, watching how humans interact, a lot of them are there for what's called sort of edutainment, right? Passing the time, social time with their friends. I mean, they'll use a panel or an exhibition component as a reference point, but really it's about social interaction. It's about spending quality time that they feel is more, what word can I use, more reflective than a shopping mall, right? There are other options, and we acknowledge that we compete in that slice of pie, not work, not sleep, not family, against movies, against shopping. That's where museums compete, right? And we embrace that. And we watch really how visitors use our spaces. Sure, some do come in for a formal education, but we have to acknowledge this social dynamic of, in order to design truly user-centered experiences, right, we need to design public spaces that hold that social dimension, that acknowledge and embrace that social dimension of a visit. So a really classic example of this is the new African American History and Culture. How many of you have been there? Bravo. So you may have noticed, you surely noticed, it's a rather uncomfortable experience down below on the lower concourse levels. Architecturally, it was very on purpose, very tight gallery spaces, sort of a lot of bodies in there. It's crammed, it's uncomfortable. And you go through this harrowing, unfortunate national story of what we've done to these human beings, and a lot of humans cry. And so we have created these sort of booths, if you will. I mean, they're booths where you can have a private moment, right? That's sort of a novel, and we've trained our visitor experience folks there to host, to sort of accommodate that reality. And so if you would have asked folks that question, you wouldn't always get that. So you have to look behind the scenes at real behaviors in public spaces or in product use, if you will, and build and accommodate programs, products that respond to real and not aspiring or for aspiring behavior.
And this is interesting from a VA standpoint. This has been, I've been at VA almost 10 years during when I was a reservist and early on, but veterans, so there is, again, that's the tension that comes into play between the needs and the wants. I think what's exciting for us is by having a conversation with veterans, first of understanding what from the veterans' perspective, what do they think? And what we found was that actually having those conversations, it actually challenges our own assumptions and actually has an opportunity for us to really say, ooh, okay, this is really something that that veterans may not need, or maybe veterans maybe needed it 20 years ago, and as we've evolved, this is something that may not be needed anymore. So that's what we found to be in that conversation. I would give an example with so what we've done is, so one of the things is, so we talk about the macro journey, but then also there's we call it the micro journeys, and really that gets into the business line. So for instance, so one of the things as a macro journey is taking care of yourself. So for veterans, one of the biggest service that the VA provides is providing outpatient experience, right? So outpatient experience, or outpatient care rather, is one of the largest elements. So, and that's anything, right? Primary care, neurology, nephrology, mental health, you name it, orthopedics, that's the outpatient sphere. So what we did is we actually did a research around that outpatient. What does that outpatient experience look like? To be able to understand the needs and the wants aspect a little bit more, because we didn't really know, because we never really asked veterans. This is the first time we've actually said, let's do. So we did this massive research across the country, rural, urban, and what the results were astounding, because they have really helped, again, challenge those assumptions for us. And by doing that and understanding what the bright spots and the pain points are, we found actually there were, a lot of the things that we've learned was actually helpful for us as a health organization to be able to address quality safety issues. For instance, Fayetteville, there was a construction project, and what they did was they put, so they had these trailers, and for some reason someone made a decision, again it was an operational decision, to put the mental health clinic in those trailers. When we had a brand new clinic a couple miles away, they put the primary care there. I mean, again, it was very it looked like secluded, kind of to the point of, how the aesthetics of it, to make sure. I mean, again, that was because we never really talked to the veterans. It was an operational decision, and it kind of makes sense if you look operationally on paper, possibly. But then, when you don't have that voice of the customer involved, it doesn't allow us to do that. But get back to the outpatient experience, when we start bringing all those nuances involved, again, that's really a qualitative exercise. Then the quantitative piece comes in. Then we start measuring, then we understand what's the truth of how an effective care truly emotional, resonant experience is. Then we start measuring that. And right now, I'm proud to say that the VA is measuring every single hospital and clinic outpatient experience. We have this data flowing in, and then this data is being flowed back to decision makers at the strategic, programmatic, operational, tactical levels. And those insights are tremendous. Like I'll give an example, quick example of one hospital. They thought their biggest issue was appointments. Turns out, really, what the issue was, it was pain management. There was a lot of dissatisfaction around pain management in that facility. Whereas another facility, it's reversed. So those are some of the examples where you start, because when you start asking from the customer generalities, if you don't really understand, able to drill down to the specifics, it's very difficult to act on it. So that something that's we're.
I want to just say one quick thing. Just want to put a word out there, a little bomb word out there, paternalism. I mean, there's a tension there, right, between what our visitors want and what they need. And I mentioned earlier, for a century, we've sort of been more paternalistic about what they need. And so while we do look sometimes at broader behaviors rather than exclusively what they say they need, you have to be really aware of being paternalistic, of telling your users what they want or need.
That's a really good point. In my view, when you're speaking to users, when you're conducting interviews, framing is very, very important. And in this particular case, I personally place much more weight on what I observe from my conversations with the user, as opposed to, for instance, I often won't ask a user, what do you need? My job is to learn about their experiences through a process. I'm glad you all mentioned journey mapping earlier. For instance, if you have a journey map when you're conducting an interview with a user, one useful exercise I find is observing when does this conversation veer away from what we call the golden path or the ideal journey and into a tangent. And oftentimes there you will find a pain point. And those pain points, in my view, are the most worthy of addressing via design.
Right.
I think we have time for a question or two before we go to our break.
Yeah, after you talk with the veterans or the Smithsonian visitors, what's your decision process of big change versus little change?
For us, I hate the term. Is there a better term than low-hanging fruit? That damn term. I mean, there are things that cost almost nothing to change, whether it be time or dollars, and there are things that cost a lot to. And so, oftentimes that is the pivot point. That's the heel on which we turn. Probably not exclusively, but typically that's it.
Yeah, for us, I mean, it's first understanding kind of the landscape. So I think that's probably one of the biggest things that we have to do. And I think we're far along on the path where we're able to decide, okay, based on what the veterans are telling us, how do we decide what are the things that we could get done, and what are some of the big strategic decisions that may take some time. I think the thread that comes throughout, like something simple, I'll give an example. So veterans were telling us, we don't understand how to navigate, your services. You have 1,000, 1,800. We have 1,800 call centers. We have all these websites. We have all. Veterans didn't know where to go, right? Or they would call a number, and then they would say, "Oh, I'm sorry, you need to talk to this person. You need to call this person. I need to call that." So, right. So that's an opportunity for us to be able to create this. Okay, what is that? No wrong door, right? And a way to get into the system and then be able to throughout. So one of the things we looked at was as a kind of a low-hanging fruit is create a welcome kit. It's the VA welcome kit. And you actually could Google it, vets.gov VA welcome kit. It's there. It's really exciting. It sounds pretty darn simple in the sense that at a macro level, okay, all based on a journey map, all the different services that from a veteran perspective, as they read it, understand very clearly, very simply, what their benefits are, how to access VA checklists. I love checklists on the aviation side. It's everything about checklists, which is great. Veterans love it. Easy to use. We designed it with veterans. It's great. What we found was that here's where the hard part came in: implementation. It's great. Now you have a product. You have this welcome kit. What do you do with it? Right? And so what was fascinating, it actually took us longer because we did not think about the implementation on the back end, on the front end, and this gets to VHA. You have all these administrations, right? How do you get everyone to agree first that this is the right, we talk about simple language, I guess a lot of policy folks, they like the policy language, the wonkety-wonk, right? We like that. No, but veterans don't like it. Veterans don't understand it. It's like they want simple, tell me straight what it is. Well, that is a tension, and how do we work through it? So we did that, and we're very proud of it. We got it out there. So I would say is even though the quote-unquote simple things, we talk about pilots, we should be thinking about, also even in the beginning of the idea, like how are we going to implement it? And often that is not just a technology. As you know, it's not about technology, it's about the process. It's about the people aspect, because for us, we have most of our employees are union, so we have to engage with the union. So there's all these other aspects. I would say those are the considerations as we're thinking about, with this tremendous opportunity rate we have here of making so much progress, is the implementation piece. We do not want to have, we call it orphan projects. Last thing we want is orphan project. And many of you probably know, you probably, unfortunately, maybe been part of one. And I've unfortunately been part of one, where you spend a lot of money, or you think something easy, and you put effort, and now no one can use it because we didn't think about the actual implementation piece. So I think the implementation, even though it's easy, quote unquote, and hard, we have to think about how are we going to actually, make it work, make it be used. And there's clear impact and outcome.
We have time for one more question. There's a microphone.
My question is, when you're creating the personas, how do you check for assumptions and biases, since clearly you can't get 7-year-olds in your customer journey mapping sessions, for example?
Right. So you can't. There are really tight federal laws that apply to all of us when it comes to talking to 7-year-olds. Fair enough. So you talk to the adult. So there are situations where you can talk to 7-year-olds. So let's just be clear about that. I'm not sure how many 7-year-olds are your customers. So if you can't reach your customer, you can talk to those who are first-line offers of your services. So we do have educators on the floor, volunteers on the floor. We invite in school teachers of 7-year-olds. We talk to parents of 7-year-olds. And when we can, of course, the 7-year-old. But there is an ecosystem of first-person responders or facilitators around a human that can get you pretty darn close. And make sure that you talk to many types of 7-year-olds or the many ecosystems around. So you don't want to talk, just to be really clear and obvious, just a white ecosystem in DC. But you want to make sure you talk to lots of ecosystems around not only the DMV zone, but around the country, right? And for us, you'd be surprised how many people are willing to talk to you about improving a service. So not just Smithsonian, we're a trusted brand. A lot of people will give us their time to improve. But we find when you lead with transparency across the board, our aim is to improve this specifically for you or for them. Will you give us a few minutes of your time? That ecosystem will respond well, favorably to you and talk to you.
I personally would advocate for personas to be as inclusive as possible, as inclusive as you reasonably can make them. My belief is that when you design for inclusion, you are actually designing for the whole. You're designing for the masses. Particularly in design, for instance, people take the shortcut of talking about dismissing things as edge cases. In government, I often believe that edge cases are typically the people in highest need of many of the services that we're working in. So I think you build against bias by building, again, the most inclusive persona that you can make an argument for.
Thank you, Victor. I just want to, For the 7-year-old, that's no proxy for any other type of user, unless it's a 6-year-old. I mean, we're talking about adults. There is no proxy, absolutely. You must find a way to talk to those. I like that edge users, because it's a really good edge user. So really, what I said about ecosystem is only for minors, really. Every other adult, every other type of user, spend the time and find them.
Yeah, this is, if I may just add, that's a great question, because for us at VA, it really was so when you think about VA takes care of veterans, right? Also, if you look in the mission statement, it talks about your survivors, right, as well. But to this point, this is a very important conversation because it really goes to, frankly, for me as a veteran, you actually probably need to talk to my wife to make me go to my appointments. She's the one that reminds me that I need to go to do that. And frankly, the reality is that the family and the support system, and it's not just the wife, the husband, the spouse. It could be the brother, it could be the sister, it could be, who's that caregiver, right? And who's the friends around it? If you think about right now, what we are facing a massive, a national challenge for us. I have friends that, committed suicide. And we need, it's not just, it takes a village. It takes all of us that we need to be involved in this, right? And we tell her, for us, so we have a buddy system. There's times I have buddies that I call, say, hey, are you okay? Are you doing, how are you doing? Oh, you're not doing okay. I can't reach you. Let me find out how I can reach you. So it's that ecosystem. It's important for us to talk to them. So when we go out and talk, it's not just the veteran. It's the family members, it's the caregivers, it's the survivors, of course. It's the friends, it's the community. We go into the community so that's it's a shift in how we're thinking, and we're feeling it, and we're seeing a lot of benefits from doing that. And it's been very, very, we're on the right path by doing that.
Great. Well, we're at the end of our time and headed toward a break. I think we could probably go on all day with this conversation, but I just want to say, join me in thanking these gentlemen for their great insights.
Thank you so much. I do think it was a great discussion. And I just want to mention, while you grab some coffee, if you could say hi to our underwriters and be back here promptly at 10:30 where we'll start our next panel. Thank you.
No, Michael.
But did you put it on the side or the middle?
It's in the back. I just will.
Beautiful. I play soccer. Look at that. I play soccer. I got his shoes black and blue.
Okay. Well, thanks so much for joining us back here. Just a few quick things before we dive in. I know that some of you are using the hashtag, but please continue to send any questions or comments with the hashtag CX Summit online. And then also I just want to thank again Qualtrics, our lead underwriter, and HighPoint, our strategic underwriter, for supporting the rest of today's conversation. So we are going to resume now our program with our panel. It is citizen-centric technology, so really focusing on how federal agencies are exploring the intersection of technology and how it meets their customer service. So I know, Aaron, you will have a great conversation, and I'll just turn it over to you.
Great, thanks. Glad you could all join us, and thanks for coming back. We've got a great panel here for what I'm actually calling CX Inception. So we're going to be going a couple levels down into what really goes into making sure that the quality of the customer experience on your government websites and the way that citizens interact with you through these services is of the highest quality. So just to get started, we'll start with introductions. Barbara, who are you? What do you do?
I'm Barbara. Hi, everybody. It's nice to see you. It's great to see a packed room, and I'm personally very passionate about this topic, so very happy to be here. Barbara Morton, Deputy Chief Veteran Experience Officer at the Department of Veterans Affairs. I've been at VA, like Lee, who's my right arm, for a little over 10 years. Started as an attorney at a group that adjudicates appeals for veterans benefits, so I was very close to case files and veterans in person at that point, really got to know the customer and kind of the pain points in that appeals process. Ended up being acting veterans law judge and director of operations of that group, and then was asked to help stand up this new customer experience office in VA about almost 2 years ago. So really excited to be in this space and happy to share our lessons learned with you all. Thanks.
And along with our customer experience expert, we have two technologists with us, CIOs. Dorothy, who are you? Who do you work for?
Hi. Thanks for inviting me. My name is Dorothy Aronson. I'm from the National Science Foundation, and I'm the Chief Information Officer. My background is software development. So I haven't developed software in maybe 25 years, but I like to think of myself as a recovering software developer because that's my true love.
And Maria?
Maria Rote, CIO for the Small Business Administration. We do not have a CX team. We'll get into talking a little bit about some of the things we're doing, though. Been at SBA a little over 1.5 years now. Time flies. And just lots going on at SBA.
So let's start with you then, Maria. As a CIO who works with all these technologies but doesn't have a CX office, what is your role in CX?
So I do have an in-house digital service team. They were brought on board a little bit before I got there. And that group, there's a number of people who wear that CX hat, if you will, and that UX hat, working with whether it's our customers, those small businesses, entrepreneurs out there, as we're upgrading, making changes to those applications that interface with the public, as well as some of the things that we're doing internally. Most of the work they're doing is really with the external facing with the public. You know, how are we improving our experience with the customers, those small businesses and entrepreneurs out there? So it's everything from our SBA.gov platform to Certified to Lender Match that we rolled out last year. So each of those things, as we continue to move through it and those systems and modernize, there's just a ton of interface with asking about the user experience.
And Dorothy, you know, as someone who's been a technologist for your whole life, you know, development and these kind of things, is it your job to make sure that people can interact with these, or is it just to deliver the tools?
Oh yeah, it's absolutely the thrust in the federal government right now is that customer experience, information technology are very closely intertwined. So we also do not have a specific user experience group within our organization, but we do have UX people. They're part of they're always part of the software development teams, but they're not. It's not separate and identified.
And Barbara, as someone who lives and breathes the experience, what's the difference between worrying about CX when it comes to technology versus IRL, you know, the real life experience of veterans dealing with your administration?
Yeah, so I think what's really interesting, and Lee gave a great sort of overview of some of the things that we've discovered in this journey that we've been on, but I think if you think about sort of VA originally or historically, it's, again, been very operationally focused. It hasn't been necessarily focused on what the actual feedback from customers is showing us. And so what we've tried to do is bring that lens using digital services, the group out of the White House, which is an awesome team, who take that industry best practice approach of actually talking to your users, talking to your customers, and designing around them. So it's, Lee talked about the tensions. It's always a balance because there's certain pieces of information as an organization and government you certainly want to be able to convey and share, but you have to now think about it, well, how is it going to be more usable to veterans to actually bring them in or to keep them using our services in VA?
So how do you interact with the veterans, your customer, to improve that experience?
Sure. So, so I mentioned we have a great digital services team at VA, and they apply that great best practice as well, human-centered design, which you're all familiar with, really going straight to the customer, understanding from a customer perspective what their needs are, and designing around that. And as Lee mentioned, we also use human-centered design in journey mapping and everything else, all other projects that we're working on. So it's really about designing up front with the user, testing, iterating, and changing based around those user needs. Yeah.
Maria, at SBA, how did you interact with the customer to improve, say, SBA.gov, Certify.gov, some of the websites and outward-facing things you have?
So the approach we're taking with SBA.gov, if you've looked at it over the last 2 years, my team has done a tremendous job of changing SBA.gov from just a website with stuff on it and information based by SBA Benefits Program Office, those kind of things. People out there don't really care what the office of X, Y, and Z is. They're after how do I get a loan? How do I start a business? How do I write a business plan? How do I do all these things as you move through the cycle of growing your business? And as we've evolved SBA.gov, it's not just a website anymore. It's a platform, and it's a digital platform to enhance the experience of those people who are coming in. If you think about SBA.gov as a platform, as a digital platform, it's really how can, and we're looking at it in terms of how is that a virtual office to provide information. And as we're adding capability onto that platform, whether it's looking at chatbots and digital, virtual counseling and adding all those things on it, that's all part of the platform. But we also have to interact with our users on that to say, how do you use the site? We can use web statistics all day long to see what people are hitting, where they're dropping off, how far they get in the pages and things like that, but really changing it to an experience, not just a website serving up stuff.
Yeah, and if I can just comment on that too, I mean, that really resonates, I think, with us here at VA. We're doing the exact same thing where you think about if you go to va.gov today, okay, it's a nice looking site, but it's really about shoveling information, right? Showing people, trying to link them to the right place. What we're trying to do now is, again, based on that model, based on the concept of this user experience and designing around the user, is making it where veterans can go and transact actually with VA on that site. So same, very similar approach. Yeah.
As a CIO, Maria, who is your customer, or do you have more than one customer?
I have many customers. I think our customers, my customers, we have every small business and entrepreneur or somebody who wants to start a business across the United States. That's a big customer, right? So I have to think about it in terms of what's public facing, how we're offering up our services. But also I have all those internal customers that rely on, the infrastructure, the network, the user platforms, all of those things. So it's not just, giving somebody a new laptop and saying, here you go, here's an upgrade. But how do I, for my internal customers, how am I changing their experience as well? How am I giving them new capabilities? How am I bringing unified communications to the table so it's not just, little stovepipes, little pieces of things? So I have to think about my internal customer as well in those kind of terms, because with, when you start turning up chat and you start turning up Yammer and you start turning up all these capabilities, there you go, and you're integrating phone systems and VoIP and all of those things into all of that. Now you've got a unified communications. Mm-hmm. And really, this is a customer experience. It's not just, here's your laptop, here, go do some work, and, we'll upgrade your versions of Office or whatever you have. It's much more than that, and it's more about the customer experience. So I look at it in a couple of different terms. We've got all those public-facing, and then we have the internal customers.
Dorothy, how has that changed over the years? Was it always the CIO's job to worry about the public customer, or was it more internal, or was it always both?
I would say that the CIO role itself is new and changing quickly. So I think that, first off, I think of everyone, as Maria does, I think of everyone as my customer, including you people in the audience. I mean, you know, I'm here as a federal employee to make the world a better place, and I'm trying to help everyone I come in contact with, especially Maria. So that includes the, you know, the external customers. So National Science Foundation's customer base is really the research community, people in universities who are asking for grant funds. Then there's the internal customer, the people within NSF who work and evaluate proposals and give out the grant funds. And then there's the people who are developing the software. They have to be happy, they have to be engaged, they have to have tools. So, you know, I'm focusing on all of those levels, including really anyone I come in contact with, because it's about sharing in the federal government. So the most recent changes are, I think, the importance of recognizing the separation between the technologists and the people who are providing the customers, but also there's people in the middle. There are people who take the information from the customers and put it into some sort of system or even write it down on paper and then provide it to the developers who don't really touch the people. And it's that in-between piece that has made a very big difference, is how do we let the developers do the developing and not be, so they can be tech nerds. And they have special tools. And so moving towards, I'm sure you've heard these terms like agile development, enables the information to come from the customer through the middle layer to the developer very quickly. And then if the developer doesn't get it right, it comes out very quickly to the customer and they get to give us feedback. And that, there's a lot of skepticism about agile development because, you know, we're just now replacing our largest external facing system, which is called Fastlane. And the Fastlane customers love that tool. Sorry if I'm just going on and on. But what we did was we started years ago surveying hundreds of thousands of people about what they didn't like about Fastlane, and most of them loved Fastlane and didn't want it to change. But then there was a community that needed it to change. And we thought at that time, waterfall development, I don't know if you know about that, but that's the long way where you get millions of dollars. Well, that was the trend. But we were afraid to take that approach. So we moved into the agile world. We forced ourselves in, even though there was a lot of skepticism about it. And we've been working that way for several years now. And we've updated our infrastructure tools that support it. So our developer tools, they're using tools like Jira now when they were using tools like Rational before to have these conversations and store the conversations with the customer. So I worry about all customers. I believe very much in trusting the customer. So one of the things that developers don't often do is they like to polish the work until it's nice and shiny. And from their perspective, what's polished isn't the same as what the customer would really want. So one of the things that I'm very into, you heard the word earlier, piloting things, and that's risky from a development perspective because you, as people were saying, you could fail. But the most important thing about that is that, you know, we just did this with a multi-million-dollar project. We put out a preview tool for the customers. It's been invaluable, but you have to really push the developers to make that happen. They're not anxious to do that.
And, you know, many technologists these days definitely are familiar with that agile process, but Maria, how do you translate that technical agile process to a user experience agile process?
Good question. So I wanted to add on to something Dorothy said, though. Talking about, you know, moving into pilots and moving into those things. Couple of the approaches we've been taking is, in particular in the Certify program, we've rolled it out while we've done our homework, talked to the users, we rolled it out very quietly and let it run for about 30 days. No announcements, no anything like that, just let it go. But take feedback as we're going, you know, to say, okay, now we're ready for an official launch. So we've been doing some soft launches like that. But from an agile perspective, you know, Dorothy talked about that from a development perspective, doing sprints and doing those kind of things. We've also applied that agile piece of it to other projects and technology projects as well. But to have everybody understand that, understand that approach, that's not waterfall anymore. You have to interface with the user, you have to understand what they're doing, and then you can iterate and really move through, whether it's 2-week sprints, a release of, a couple of weeks or several sprints, and how you get to that. So, bringing in those customers and those users is really, really important. And you're right, the developers, they can polish it all day long, but is that what's really needed?
And it sounds like from that, what you just explained with the certify process was exactly what I was thinking, right? That minimum viable feedback. Is that a thing, Barbara?
Yeah, I mean, I think so, exactly. I mean, to me it is, right? I mean, as a user and, as somebody who's trying to create and drive a better user experience, you absolutely want to get started and get that feedback immediately and then pivot as needed. So you're not going down this waterfall path, which I know historically is the way it's been, where you build something, you get to the end of 2 years and $20 million, and it actually isn't quite working well, right? One of the things that I think is actually fascinating being in a government space here, you think about sort of traditional bureaucracy and sort of what are your milestones for this fiscal year, what are you going to hit and when. The agile process is a little tricky, I think, for folks, and we see that a lot. So digital services, the way they work is, quick sprints, 2-week sprints, they pivot, they don't necessarily know what the end destination is really going to be because the user is going to influence that. So that's a very interesting, another tension that we see, how we kind of balance each of those interests.
Can I say, too, that the government isn't really set up for agile. We don't get
breaking news. Breaking news.
And so implementing agile development meant also implementing a more agile way of budgeting.
Yep.
And our governance groups who are I wouldn't say they don't spend a lot of time thinking about IT. So our governance groups get together periodically through the year. But what we're doing, what we've planned to do on day 1 is not the same thing that we end up doing on day 365. And so if we have to allow ourselves to change, even though there's a desire to say, just like you were saying, there's periodic releases and you're supposed to do things exactly on, and you're measured. You're my performance review is based on having accomplished something that I've predicted a year in advance. Well,
how does that work for you?
Yeah, right. Well, I'm looking for work. But, so I'm just saying, but you have to fight that. You have to fight you have to and be bold about telling people, I'm sorry, it's not going to be that, and they have to hear it. They don't have any choice in that. And they're going to want to. They push back all the time. They're saying, "I'm sorry, you told me this. You're given this amount of money," and I'm like, "Well, I don't need all that money, but I'm not going to give you the thing either." Yeah. So you just have to be very brave, I think, to make that kind of impression on the organization.
So the obvious customer when we talk about customer experience is whoever your agency serves, right? So SBA, it's the small businesses. NSF, it's the researchers. For you, it's the veterans. Let's start down the rabbit hole of the other customers that you all are responsible for. The next layer down would be your internal people, right? The people who are probably not technologists themselves, but have to deal with the customer every day. How do you make it easier for your fellow government employees to interact with citizens and your external customers? Anyone like to start?
Oh, I have no idea.
Tough question, huh?
I know. How do you make it easier for the technologists to interact with
the non-technologists?
The SBA people who aren't developing.
Right. So people who aren't in your CIO shop, who aren't worried about the technology.
Employees throughout the organization.
What technologies are you giving non-technical employees to help them deal with?
So actually, they have to be part of the process, right? So
do,
those folks that are behind the scenes working on the system. So take the Certify program, right? We certify for many things, 8A and women-owned and veteran and all those. So we certify for all those things. But if those folks that are working behind the scenes on the systems that are validating and reviewing all the documentation and stuff like that, they are absolutely a part of the entire process. It's not that I have my own, DS team and, as well as some USDS folks, and they're not working in a silo by themselves. They have to work with those internal users to say, how do you use the system? How do you validate? What documents do you review? How do you know that, how do you verify that this is going to be, a veteran-owned or a hub zone or something like that? They absolutely have to talk to those users on the inside, because ultimately their user experience is going to change. Not only is the user experience for those small businesses, entrepreneurs going to change, it's for those users internally. Their entire experience has to change. So change management is going to be a huge piece of this as we move through. You just can't say, oh, this is what the customer wanted, poof, automatically, here you go, and oh, by the way, it's not business as usual. Yeah. So when you start replatforming, changing not just how the external customer, those users internally on the projects and having to review those applications and the like, there's a big change management piece of it, because not only do they have input on this is how I do my job, guess what, their job may change and how they do business, because there's a lot of things that may be automated downstream and they don't have piles of paper anymore.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
Can I add on that for a moment?
Of course.
So if your agency is serving a customer base, it's my belief that if the people inside the agency are not happy, then they're not going to make their customers happy. I think it's about, and so for us, I don't think of the customers as tiered. I think of the internal customer as absolutely essential in pleasing their needs so that they can serve their external customer in the same way. It's like a contagious thing. And so I just promote all levels. And I said before, I think that the developers count too. Everyone in the agency needs to have a positive view of, and a shared view of the customer experience.
Yeah, and on, as we replatform and, as we're, SBA.gov is our platform, as we're, changing that, the internal people who are so used to just throwing something up on a page because it's part of their office, we're just going to throw it up there, having them rethink, how does that help that small business entrepreneur, somebody out there, how does that document, how does that piece of information help them? And there's so much ownership on this stuff that
it's hard to break through
It's how to break through that, and that's part of change management.
I think by going through the process of actually engaging your internal customers, your employees, that's, to your point, is sort of teaching them, this is the way we're thinking about our external customers. We're treating you no differently. We want to know how you do your job. We want to look at what you're doing. Don't just throw requirements over a wall, but actually be agile with you, develop it with you. So that, to me, is a huge part of the change management as well, is actually bringing employees in the fold and making them part of that process.
And I'd like to double down on that with you, because as the non-technologist up here,
yes.
staying at that same level of customer, but flipping the question around, how do you work with the technologists at VA to make sure that the non-technology employees are getting what they need?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, again, we have the digital services team at VA who we work very closely with. They, to me, are really, they're Google geeks, they're Amazon geeks. They're brilliant technologists from industry. So it's very easy for me to kind of defer to how they want to solve a problem, because their practice is using human-centered design. So users tell them what they need and what they want, and they know the kind of the best way to do it from industry, using industry practices. Excellent. So they translate, they can translate, which is good.
All right, next level down, there's one more after this, but the next level down is the technologists, right? So your IT shops, your CIO shops, Dorothy, how are you, as the CIO at NSF, making sure that the other people in your shop are getting what they need from an experience perspective?
We try, again, to isolate the IT shop in a way, because they're introverted and they want to be isolated. So we have tools that capture use cases, user experiences, and those tools have to be usable by the people who are capturing the information, but also understandable by the technicians. And so investing in that, those are also automated systems. So the tools that the developers have to be familiar to them. They have to understand them, and we do invest in that. So we, again, we appeal to what's strong about the developers. We have to understand their needs as well.
So we're at SBA. What kind of tools are you giving your developers to interact with their customers and get that feedback?
So we're trying to, it's a little bit everything. We are using Jira. We are using just a whole swath of tools. But we want to make sure that the developers have the tool set, whether it's Jira or anything else, to be able to capture those use cases and be able to document it and help them move through the sprints and the releases and make sure all that happens. Much like Dorothy said about, the group of technologists. Those folks are also getting exposure to some of those things, like you mentioned, like Jira and some of the others, because even last year as we were laying out our cloud architecture and our cloud migration strategy, we used Jira. We did
those who don't know, what is Jira? Just in case there's anyone here.
Does everybody know what it is? Yeah, okay. See?
Just one.
So
we got to know.
Okay, so it's a way of organizing the software, and it's a repository for business application software or any application software, but it also allows the sort of the life cycle. It documents the life cycle of software development.
Yeah. And in this case, we used it for our cloud architecture and our cloud migration. We had one release that was 2 months long, but that was a series of 4 2-week sprints, and we used something like Jira. So a lot of my folks who were the technologists and backroom kind of people got an introduction to what's a release. Here's what a sprint is. It's 2 weeks, and we're documenting every day in daily stand-ups. So it's not just the developers that are getting exposure to some of those tools and some of those capabilities, and because we knew that we had to do a cloud architecture. What did that look like at the end? Couldn't tell you what it looked like, but guess what? We had daily stand-up meetings. We had 4 2-week sprints. We documented it all. What were the action items? Okay, next day, next 15-minute stand-up meeting. So bringing the work that was already being done with our developers and moving that into the technology space, is starting to just provide some overlap and some education and getting people to think a little bit differently as we're rolling things out.
Can I add one thing?
Sure.
I think we're all talking about one thing sort of circuitously, which is that each of these people have their own cultures. There's external customers, there's developers who have their own cultures, and then there's the culture of the agency. And from a CIO perspective, I'm responsible for making change happen. And so a lot of times that means making people who are entrenched in the way they work change the way they work. And that is an art. So we have to be we talk about tools and how developers are surprised because they're going from waterfall to agile. We talk about customers who are maybe stovepiped in one part of the organization, but now they have to reach across the organization. All of those changes are happening at the same time as technology is being inserted. One thing I'm very concerned about in all of this is what happens to the people who are I think the people who are using technology and being considered technologists is changing sort of dramatically right now by the insertion of something called data science. So where it used to be that the technology group was sort of isolated, a small one little piece, now there are people throughout the agency who are doing data analytics and using technology differently. And I'm worried about the people who are non-technologists and how to bring them in. So there's all these levels of people are moving and growing and changing at the same time. And we have to be courteous, but aggressive. And it's very challenging.
And I think if I can add on that, so it's fascinating to be up here and hear these common themes across different agencies. I mean, I love this space. I think it's really interesting. And
do you guys have time? We could go longer.
I know, we could go forever. But in terms
lock the doors, don't worry.
Yeah, nobody's leaving. So in terms of data analytics, though, you're absolutely right. And I think what we need to do, I mean, data and analytics might be scary to some people. So that's why it's so important to make it digestible and understandable to even the simplest of people like myself. I'm not going to be able to read a spreadsheet and different types of pieces of data on Excel, but if you digest it, you put it in a graphic for me, you kind of prioritize it, say these are the top hotspots, that's going to be something that I can use. So I agree with you that it's an intimidating shift, but it's a big, real shift. Yeah.
Okay, we're going to drop down one more level, and then we're going to open it up for questions. So start thinking about what questions you have for our group up here. The final level of this CX journey is the people who manage the customer experience, right? The people who are ingesting that information and have to make sense of all that data. I'm thinking of a time way back when we were doing an awards program and we were using a database thing to intake people's opinions on who should be nominated. And the database that it spit out, all the information was just illegible. You couldn't figure out who was talking about what or what was going on. So, Dorothy, I know at NSF, you all are putting out the second generation of CX tools that your people are using to determine what the customer experience is. What do those tools look like?
Well, for me, the second generation of tools are the ones, because we don't have a separate CX shop, the tools that we're talking about are Rational and Jira, the tools that capture the user experience. The digesting of the information is also a big data problem that requires analytics, and we do have people who are, I don't know what kinds of tools you all are using. We have business intelligence, all kinds of business intelligence tools, and they help take the information that's in these repositories and make sense of it.
But what kind of tools do you use at VA to digest that information?
Yeah, so I mean, again, we talked about a lot about the human-centered design approach that we take. So we actually partner with the OPM Lab, which I think was mentioned before, and those are best in industry designers. They know how to kind of gather that qualitative information, qualitative information from direct interviews, put it in, synthesize it, put it in a journey map. So that's kind of one element. The other component, which Lee talked about, is sort of more the other type of data that we get in from survey feedback. So it's really, again, about visualizing that data, having a platform where you can actually prioritize, what are the hot spots, what's that signal intelligence that's coming in, being able to break it down by facility, by topic, kind of word search. So again, designing around the user, having these tools that are used in industry to make it simple for folks to actually ingest the data and act upon it.
And Maria, you mentioned you don't have a dedicated CX team. So for you and your team, what's your experience in interacting with the customer experience data?
I think we're doing much of the same thing, collecting it from the users, whether it's surveys, interviews, so having that data available. But it's also looking at the more on top of the data, looking at web page hits, where are people going? In our business, understanding where the hit's coming from, which pages get hit the most, which ones, where are people dropping off? So that's one more data element. So you can't just say it's all about just the interview and talking. You have to pull in all of these other elements to it to really understand that experience.
And can I add one more thing too? So, I mean, VA, again, is a very, the second largest department in the government. So as Lee mentioned before, we've got different administrations, lots of sub-business lines within that. So one of the things that we have historically kind of wrestled with, I think along this journey, is the concept of governance. Now, it sounds probably very wonkety-wonk, but for those of us in government, you kind of need some sort of framework or structure where everybody is going to agree that we're going to have the customer insights drive this decision-making and any changes, whether it's service recovery or performance improvement. So that's something that we're working on now cross administrations, because every administration has had their own. We're looking at from a holistic standpoint, being the CX office, looking across all business lines and establishing that framework so we can make integrated enterprise-wide decisions on digital strategy, for example, contact center modernization strategy. So it's all centered around veteran and user insights. So.
Great. Do we have any questions from the audience? We've got microphones coming, so.
Hi, thanks everyone. I would like to hear a little bit about your experiences managing customer expectations. Some of you mentioned the Agile method as a way to handle continuous improvement, but I'm curious, when a customer's priorities are subsumed by other priorities from other customers, or in the case where the structure of your organization requires some stability or security enforcement that doesn't allow their priority to be fully met quickly in the way that they're expecting it to be.
Yeah, I mean, I can start. Great question. Again, this gets back to these tensions that we uncover in this space where you're blending best practices in industry, but yet government's not industry. How do you find those balances? We do have to get ATOs that take 10 months. We do have to provide higher levels of security for PII, particularly in a veteran space. So I think it's a matter of really trying to understand what the business kind of problems that we're trying to solve are, the requirements are, and finding a way to harmonize and blend those two. We're not always going to be able to release something as fast as industry industry will. But if we apply those principles, I'm really convinced that it actually helps us to move things along quicker and in a better fashion for our customers. But it is a balance.
I'd also say transparency is very important. So that word, to me means that you say what is true. And so customers can be disappointed, but there's only so much you can accomplish. And so, I get occasional angry emails, and I usually start. I usually start with an apology and then an explanation of where we are. But there's also this, and if you want to follow what we're doing and what's really happening, maybe you could look over here. So we try to always say what's going on, even though the course may change. And I am sorry when people are disappointed by the product, but I also feel like, we're not going to get to everyone.
Just to push it a little further, I'm sure all the feedback you get is positive and constructive, and but on those rare occasions. Yeah. But the reality is, as I'm sure we all know, people are far more likely to engage when they're unhappy, right? That's just that's the impetus. How do you deal with that?
Welcome to my world.
Yeah.
We're trying to change that. Actually, I tend to be pretty candid, and I've been very upfront about where SBA is in its journey, whether it's, if we can't roll something out now, is there a security constraint? I will tell you, I'm pretty upfront and transparent about this stuff, and through whether it's internal CIO forums or the SESs and working with all of those folks, I will tell them up front, here's the constraint on security. Or if, sometimes my team even is telling me no on something, and my favorite question is one of my favorite is probably why not? And why is it going to take so long? I get in our budget world, we don't have unlimited budgets, and you can do only so many things at one time, and so you have to be very open and transparent about that. If there's security constraints, it's a security constraint. Okay, great. Is it something we can accept risk on? Is it just a matter of time and getting something done? So yeah, I think being very open about it, and if it's somebody hollering at you, okay, own it and work towards a solution.
And I think empathy also goes a really long way as well. I mean, I love that you're saying, I always start with an apology, and it's like, it's so easy to say, well, the ATO, it's not my control, I can't make it move any faster. But if you approach it in a different way and say, I completely get it. It's really irritating that the ATO takes 10 months. I totally get it. We're doing our best to move it along. So, if you're talking to a veteran, same thing. The empathy piece is the easiest to go first because you're just moving so fast and you're trying to get to an answer and to a solution. But I actually think it's the most important part of that positive experience. So whether it's a coworker or an external customer, relating, I think, and just being kind of human to human goes a really long way.
Probably got time for about one or two more, but I know we got one right here.
Yes, earlier. Is this on?
There it is.
There we go. Earlier I heard mention of soft launch, and so I guess what I'd like to know from any of you, what benefits have you experienced from doing a soft launch, and then in that agile environment, when do you know, or what threshold do you sort of cross where you know you're ready for the big splash?
Yeah.
So I mean, we're in the midst of that right now, if you guys don't mind. So how do you know when to do the soft launch? How do you know when to, so the soft launch we've done with this new Fastlane product is a few months before the real event. We put out a version of the product that could do everything except save the data. So the customers could go out and pretend to go through the process, but the data didn't get into the operational system. And customers loved it. We got a lot of positive feedback. We also got people finding bugs for us, which we've been able to correct. So again, because we're agile, rather than doing whatever we were planning to do between the soft launch and the real launch, we started correcting problems that we saw. We learned a lot about training. It's not all about the software. It's about what's people's impression of this? What's their first impression? So we went right on schedule. So we knew in February we were doing we called it a preview, and that this month we're doing the real release. Those things were set, but the scope of what those things were not known. And we've benefited tremendously.
Maria, in your soft launch, did you invite people to it, or was it fully under the radar?
I'll use 8A for an example. We launched that last fall. So part of that was just bringing it up, bringing it online. You know, we had worked with customers all along, but did that soft launch, no press release, none of that. We didn't have any big announcements on it, but we did the same thing Dorothy's talking about. Take that continual feedback, fix things as we found them, as they were reported, and then waited on the official launch. So that, I mean, we've done that a couple of times now, and it's worked out well.
One more. Back here.
Hi, I'd like to know, what do you specifically measure to get at customer experience? Do you ask a standard question across all of your metrics channels and things? I'm just curious to know. And also in relation to operational type metrics.
And do any of you have a metric for the size of my forehead vein when I'm trying to use a website?
We do.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'll start. So as Lee mentioned, so VA has adopted the Forrester model, which measures 3 key components of experience. And if you think intuitively about, I'm a Dunkin' Donuts girl, I go to Dunkin' Donuts, they're things that I expect. It should be easy to get my decaf iced latte with 1 pump of French vanilla. Right? Should be easy. It should be effective. It should be actually a good product. And finally, it should be emotionally resonant. I should feel like I'm welcomed and a valued customer. Those are the kind of 3 foundational components that are drivers to ultimately this overall concept of trust. And I think trust has a key, is a key component not only for private sector, obviously, but for government in particular, because we're stewards of taxpayer dollars. The one thing that I'll highlight, which is really exciting, I don't know if you all are familiar with the President's Management Agenda, CAP goal, cross-agency priority goal, any hands? On improving customer experience in federal services. It's great. It's an awesome one. So excited, partners with OMB and GSA on driving that. And one of the things that we're talking about, as you'll see in the action plan online, is how do we look across agencies and have some sort of consistent metric about customer experience? Are we going to use that trust, ease, effectiveness, emotion? You know, it would be easy to copy and paste that to other agencies. So we're working through that, but that, you know, that's kind of where we are.
It's not the private sector, right?
Right, exactly.
We're about to get the hook here, so maybe about 30 seconds each during the break.
I don't have a standard way. Sorry.
So you don't have a standard way. I was going to say, is there a difference between the private sector and the way that government should operate when you ask these questions?
I think we follow kind of the same model that you're doing, just in general.
I think the core components of experience are the same.
But experience is experience.
Trust, ease, effective, emotion.
Please, join me in thanking our fantastic panel.
Good job. Thank you, guys.
So much, great conversation. And now we have our last fireside chat of today. I think Aaron's going to come back up here, but I'd like to welcome our speaker, Rick DeLapp. He's the program manager at recreation.gov. And he is going to share with us about all of the operations that he oversees at the Interagency Recreation One-Stop Program. I know from day-to-day operations and financial management to strategic planning, acquisition, and contracting. So Rick pretty much does it all for recreation.gov website and recreation information database. So take it away.
You.
Yeah.
Good to see you all again. I know it's been a while. Rick, just to get us kicked off here, it was a fantastic introduction, but who are you? What do you do?
So that was a large introduction, and I do little bits and pieces of those things, but I have a team that manages many of those aspects. So I'm the program manager for Recreation One Stop. So how many people have made a reservation to go to a national forest or national park, campground, or a tour? So many of you have used the site that we have right now. And as I just indicated, it covers 7 different agencies. So we're a truly interagency project with the U.S. Forest Service, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, Park Service, and all the other DOI agencies. So I've worked for the Park Service for 29 years. I was a ranger. Why am I overseeing a software development program and reservation service? It evolved into this. I was working in a campground in Zion and working with an older reservation system when I got involved with management, and they pulled me into Washington, and well, it evolved from there. So
you get to do the grand DC park instead of being out in the woods.
Well, I was in Washington for a couple years, and then we relocated the program out to Denver to be a little bit more central.
Excellent, excellent. So for those who aren't aware, talk to us a little bit about the project. What is recreation.gov? What's the goal?
Yeah, so Recreation One Stop was an e-government initiative in 2002. Park Service had their own reservation system. The Army Corps and the Forest Service had come together. So we had redundant kind of systems there, and we wanted to put them together to reduce the redundancy and make it a little bit more efficient. There was a lot of urgency to get that done quickly, and in doing so, it actually took us longer than it should have.
It almost always does.
It always, right. And back then, a lot of people were talking about waterfall versus agile, and it was definitely a waterfall project. And so the platform that we use today was built many years ago, and it's been challenging to evolve it. So what we're doing right now is a few years ago, we pulled together an RFP. Some folks have mentioned the U.S. Digital Service. Thank you, U.S. Digital Service. They were so helpful to us in kind of reshaping our vision on how do we do this. I was in a staff meeting, so there was a lot of different discussions going on, and one of them was they're talking about providing educational curriculum to teachers. And one person said, well, the first thing we have to do is decide what we're going to give them. And I just was deer in the headlights. I was like, well, really? Why don't we ask them what they want? And so for me, it was kind of a change. And so working with U.S. Digital Service, we started doing that and looking for a vision that would be user-centric designed and not just the government serving up a new reservation system.
And if you had stuck with that waterfall project model, I imagine it would have been really hard because what people want today isn't going to be what they want tomorrow, right? As technology changes and we get new ideas about what we can do, we realize what we want.
Right. Yeah, I mean, the classic example for our program is when we started on the contract that we're still in right now and finishing up, nobody had smartphones. And everybody does all of this on their phone nowadays, and so our system was never envisioned that kind of leap in technology. And we also recognize that over the life of this next contract, who knows what's going to be next? The watch is out, but something else can come out. And so we want to be able to feed that technology with our information and with our data in a very agile way using automation so that we don't have to redevelop every couple of years.
So as you switched from a waterfall to an agile, what proactive moves did you make to incorporate the user experience and user feedback?
Yeah, so we did quite a bit. We started off when we were doing our RFP by trying to be really transparent with it. My experience in delivering RFPs was everything is a close hold. You can't talk about anything. Don't let anyone know what's going to be in here until the surprise day when it comes out. And right? People are laughing. So we decided to release our RFP early and frequently and take white papers and conduct due diligence sessions with potential offerers, with the public, or anyone else who was interested. We hosted, I don't know, 4 or 5 industry days that were just open to anyone. And on the last one, we even, instead of making it a government presentation of here's our RFP, we really wanted to host a conversation between the different communities that were interested in it. So we had big vendors, we had small vendors, we had open data individuals that were all expressing their own perspective on what recreation.gov should be and what it could do. And it really informed us in building our RFP to be something that could respond to those.
And from the RFP and even into the process, per the discussion we just had with the last panel, right? There's different kinds of customers that you want those feedback from.
Yeah.
So can you kind of go through the thought process of identifying the broad range of customers that you cared about?
Yeah, well, we have, we had a lot of experience.
Or I should say users.
Yeah, we had a lot of experience, since we've been doing this for, more than 10 years. So first of all, there's our internal users, the agency staff, and we want to make sure that we are providing them with tools that make their jobs more efficient and fun tools as well. You can't lump all of our external public users into one bunch. We've got seasoned users that go out and go camping, every other weekend all through the summer to go fishing and boating, and they know exactly where they want to go. They know what site they want. We want them to have a nice, easy experience. You don't need to go through all the extraneous information because I know I want site 14.
These super users.
Yeah, so get to them quick. We also want to inspire the people that aren't that haven't used it or don't go outside very often. We want them to have a really good experience on our website or through our call center so that we can encourage that, that engagement. We talk a lot about in our agencies about growing the next generation of stewards, and that's what we need. We need the younger generation to love our parks and our forests so that they will stand up for them.
And if they can't get there with an app, they're not going.
Right.
Yeah, fair enough. So, we've been talking a lot about moving from waterfall to an agile approach. Is there anything you miss about the waterfall approach?
Weekends. Yeah. It is an intense process. I've been really fortunate. And part of our RFP, we required the vendor to have an office in Denver where some of us already sit so that we can do this agile process more easily and not fly somewhere every other week. Since we started, I probably worked 90% of my time at the contractor's office. And it's not just the project manager, it's the marketing and communication teams, and it's agile development teams. UX designers are right there. We're all in one big room, not quite as big as this room. And it's fun when I can see them over there writing on the walls, and then they look over and they're like, "Can you come over here?" And we ask a question, and we usually just start telling stories. It's like they're trying to develop a solution, and I can't tell you how to develop a solution because I don't write code, but I can tell you what the experience that's driving this need.
So you're almost like Charlie in the Chocolate Factory here. You're like the user who gets to be in the middle of how it's all getting made. Through this process, what's something that you've learned? What was one of the experiences where you said, okay, we know we're going to want the website or the app to do this, but then when you were talking to people, you went, no, it needs to be this?
Yeah, I learned a lot about technology because like I said, I was a ranger. My degree, we went around our room one day and they're all talking about their degrees in computer science and engineering, and I said, I'm botany. So I've learned a lot about technology, and I've learned a lot about how you can use technology to create better tools. So, our system is not like one big solid platform. We're building it in a modular fashion so that we can expand it and configure it for anything new that comes along. I think, for example, right now we have, we do camping and we do backcountry permits and tickets. We run some lotteries. But then we had a request to manage sports fields, and it's just a big grassy field. But it's a softball field in some seasons, and it's for leagues in another season, and it's a soccer field somewhere else. And that doesn't fit into any of those other buckets. Mm-hmm. So we learned that the best way to provide a good service is to keep it really, really flexible. Through this approach, we can just build a new microservice that's going to be about sports fields, and we don't have to worry about it trying to fit into a camping.
Right, you just bolt it on.
Yeah.
Excellent. As you learn things, though, I imagine there have been some painful moments. How do you get over the fact that what you thought you knew and that this cool thing you were working on when everybody says, no, we don't want that, stop it?
Well, there's a lot of challenges. We have, like I said, we have 7 agencies, and there's 7 different missions and 7 different mandates and 7 different ways that they manage. If you think about the Army Corps, anyone in here from DoD, it's definitely top-down driven, and the folks at the Army Corps will do what the general says. In the Park Service, it's not so top-down. It's more from the superintendent's level. And so each park may approach the same problem in a different way and have different reasons for doing so. Maybe it's a management plan or litigation that came out with a decision that you must do it this way. So one of the pain points that really for us is always trying to provide consistency in the system so that the public doesn't find a new experience at every park or forest that they go to, but also being respectful of the reasons that there's all this uniqueness. And like I said, we have places where management plans were worked on with the public. They came up with an agreeable solution, and now we need to support that.
And we're not talking in the abstract here, right? This isn't something that you finished up years ago or that is coming down the road. You're right in the middle of this right now.
We are right in the, yep. So our schedule right now is we are in testing. So we got, MVP was delivered in January, and we are in intense testing right now. We're slowly expanding our our pool of testers.
So where'd you start
with
testing?
Well, I mean, the first thing we did for testing was we had our very core group go into the production site and just start trying to shake it up, see what falls out.
Try to break things?
And lots of things fell out. You know, and so before we exposed that to a broader group and get the same defect over and over, we kept it pretty tight.
So were those tech people trying to break things?
No.
No, those were
it was
other rangers like yourself trying to break things.
Contractors and mostly our core team, the Recreation One Stop program and some agency folks.
Okay, so then as you broaden that out, who was next?
Next, it's more agency folks, and ultimately it will be every single agency kind of manager. So your campground managers will all be going in and validating their own data, and in the process of doing so, they'll be running through all of the different processes to get there and finding other things.
So then you've got your internal users. At what point do you push it out to the external users for testing?
So a lot of that, some of that is going on right now. We've done it in-house with our contractor staff, not to the whole general public, but we actually selected this group because they're internal and because a lot of what they were building is still proprietary and weren't ready to expose it. Later this spring and during the summer, we'll be doing just exactly that, pulling in some core groups. We work with a lot of the communities in Colorado, just because it's local. And you know, there's the University of Colorado, there's the Colorado Tourism Office, various other entities that are into that. So we can have a select group before we actually spread it far and wide.
Do you have a plan in place to push it out wider when that time comes?
We will look, before we launch, we'll be looking at some target groups, not just open, not like a full open beta test.
Right.
We do plan to do a soft launch to put it out there and get that feedback right away to try and, you know, catch the defects and bugs. And
one of the goals you talked about earlier was also making this usable for your non-traditional users.
Mm-hmm.
How do you plan to reach out to people who wouldn't have interacted with this before, but you think might be interested?
Oh, that's a great question. So we do have a full marketing and communications component of this to help meet those agency goals, right? Everyone's looking to reach out to that next generation, and there's a lot of underserved audiences that don't come to national parks and forests. So there's a lot of communication strategies that are being developed right now. We'll also be working on partnership opportunities with different entities that are already, you know, engaged with those communities. And the other thing is, we're putting a lot of effort into making it intuitive and enticing. We're, you know, to make it easy to build a trip and learn about things that you might not have known were there. Lots of people have heard about Yellowstone and Grand Canyon, but right around all those is a vast array of public lands opportunities.
I got one more for you, then we'll have time for one or two quick questions. One of the things you and I had talked about in the prep call way back when is that what's the goal of your user testing, right? It's not just usability. One of the things you had mentioned was it's also inspiration, right? The site you're trying to get people to be interested in the parks.
Yeah.
How do you test that in your user experience testing?
Well, that's a tough question. I think we would measure our success in a number of different ways. I think one would be that, you know, Weekend Warrior super user is satisfied with our product and can make a reservation like that. I think another one is that we see increases in the first-time users or the infrequent users coming, and we get them out there and enjoying it and using the system more and more. I think we see efficiencies in our local operations, where we used to download a spreadsheet and type the numbers into another system and send it to someone to review, and then why don't they just talk to each other? Right. And I think, but finally, I think one of the biggest measures of success for me, at least what I would like to see, because I haven't seen this in a lot, is that when we get relevant feedback, that we can act on it quickly. Our Agile teams can turn that around in a couple of weeks or whatever it is during a sprint or two, and not 2 years down the road in some, you know, nefarious roadmap that says, well, sorry, you have to wait for the next release.
Excellent. Any questions from the audience? Oh, got one right here. And just because the microphone wasn't working for everyone, we have a specific user request here to for Rick to control the weather. Was that? No, it was if you book ahead of time and for some reason you have to cancel your plans, is there some ability in there for refunds or the like?
Sure. We definitely process refunds. The contract mechanism here is a confirmed fixed price on a per transaction basis, and so regardless of whether a reservation is used or not, the contractor does earn their commission on the initial creation of the reservation. So what we strive to do is give you back as much of your recreation fees as possible while still covering that. Our whole program is funded by non-appropriated funds. We don't have any appropriations to support this, so that's how we cover that.
And Rick will be on the side taking pull requests after this to add to the game. Any other final questions? No? Great. Rick, thank you very much.
All right, Aaron. Thanks so much. Okay.
That wraps up our program. I just want to make 3 small notes. One is that we hope you enjoyed this conversation and got some takeaways, so please let us know your feedback. Watch for our survey that we will send to you. We hold this event, it's biannual, so we will hold another one in the fall, so watch your inbox for that invite. And then thank you so much for our underwriters who supported this conversation and all the work that they do in the field, our elite underwriter, Qualtrics, and our strategic underwriter, High Point. So have a great rest of the day, and we'll talk to you guys soon.